Welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast, a resource for parents who are feeling outpaced and overwhelmed as they raise children in a tech world. As an educator, parent, and tech user, I want to equip parents with the tools, resources, and confidence they need to raise kids who love God and use tech. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast. My name is Nathan, and I want to introduce myself a little bit since this is one of our early ones. The Gospel Tech Podcast is really focused around equipping parents with the tools and the information they need so that you can raise kids who love God and use tech. I believe that parents are central to doing this. This is why that I'm not just traveling and speaking just to kids, but I'm also creating content for families because my goal is to see parents be able to raise their kids without having to Google how to do that. In order to help with this conversation, Gospel Tech is a specific tool where we now talk about what does it mean to believe in the gospel, right? That God sent his son Jesus to die for our sins, to live a life that we can't, to take a death that we deserve, so that we have access directly to the throne room of a heavenly Father who loves us and has a purpose for us, that we are saved for the world, not from it. In light of that, that should bleed into all areas of our life, including our technology use, okay? This idea of free time, for example. We don't have free time, you just have time. You have 24 hours in a day. How we use that time matters. Some of us, we are awesome, we are healthy, we are doing great because we are living in light of our call daily. Some of us, we get distracted, and some of that distraction comes from technology. So when we talk about gospel tech, that's what we're doing here, is we are diving into our conversation of who am I supposed to be in light of what Jesus has done for me? How do I raise my children out of that? And specifically, really micro, how do I focus on the area of technology? How do I know if I'm doing a good enough job in that field? So to help us begin that conversation, we are today going to be talking about the area of video games, because when I go out and do talks, I find that I often get questions like, hey, should my son or daughter be playing this video game? And while I love having those conversations because I'm a big fan of video games as far as like a historical arc, I think they are an amazing thing. They are a powerful way to communicate and a wonderful experience many times. I don't like telling parents how to run their lives, meaning I don't like to come in and say, yes, this game, no, that game. I am much more of a fan of helping parents see how they can raise their children out of the knowledge that they have. I do not believe every parent has to be a video game specialist. In fact, I found that sometimes the video game specialists have blind spots where they love video games so much, like myself, we can run into times where we're not so clear on some of our expectations. So I actually have created a tool for that. If you go to flintandiron.org, Flint and Iron is the nonprofit my wife and I started a few years ago to help spark positive purpose in young people. And out of that, birth gospel tech, the idea that we need to connect our technology to the gospel so we can live out of that in a tech world, not just flail around and try to be quote unquote good people and then keep our technology somehow in check. That's not going to work. We need to make sure that everything is under one umbrella, in gospel tech helps us do that. If you go to flintandiron.org, you go to the parent resources and scroll down. You'll find a link that says, Mom and Dad, can I play this game? It's a YouTube video that actually walks you through categorically a conversation of 6 categories: characters, themes, violence, language, playtime, game experience. Out of these, how do I build a rubric to actually come down to a clear answer? Not just yes or no because I said so, but here's our expectation or hope for you. Here's where it doesn't line up, or here's where it does line up, and this is great. So we have that conversation. There's a second conversation about video games that's, well, is it healthy in just your life? So the game is fine, but are you fine? And that's a little acronym I made up called a reset. And you look at your kids' relationships, their enjoyment of life, those things they're uniquely equipped to like. So my 6-year-old son loves organization. He's super determined. He's been keeping a calendar since he was 4.5, right? So if I see him take part in any activity that changes who he is and he no longer has the enjoyment of who God's designed him to be, then I go, all right, that friend group or that activity or whatever, it has some negative impact on you, and I'm noting that. I'm not even going to take it away right away necessarily. I'm just noting this, and I want to see where is it coming from? What's the root cause of this change I'm seeing? So their relationships, their enjoyment, their sleep patterns, their emotional health and behavioral kind of reaction to things. So the most clear one would be my kid is going to watch a show, or my kid has video game time coming up, or they have time on social media. Do their emotions change if they don't get that? Does this impact their ability to enjoy life? They were looking forward to their tech time and then they don't get it. And not just are they disappointed, but does this lead to that next level frustration and anger and really the knockdown, drag out fights that come forward? Or after they use it, are they a different person? Are their emotions just different? They're not as engaged. They're not as joyful. So that'd be emotions. And the last one is sleep. Anything that impacts the sleep of a developing brain, we want to know about. That's friend groups, that's multiple commitments in the evenings, that's our technology, both in the bedroom and just out in life. If this is impacting their sleep patterns, we care. So we have a reset. We have a Mom and Dad, Can I Play This Video Game tool that will walk you through in just a few short minutes. You can know nothing about any video games. I give you the links. I give you the rubric. I encourage and then kind of teach you how to walk through the different steps. And you can, on your own, with any video game, at any level of knowledge, be able to answer that question and then come back to me. And if you have specifics on, man, how do I apply this? My kid came back with this response, or my spouse thinks this about the game. That's awesome. I would love to help have that conversation, but I really do think it's incredibly valuable and important that parents lead the way in that conversation. With that in mind, today we're talking about games worth playing. So I like video games, but we need to have a big holistic conversation because the first, I'm really going to go through 3 steps here. What are 3 kind of, 3 discussions to be had around games? And the first one is the game designed to be addictive? So the first thing I would say about video games is aim for older games. Older games were designed to be engaging. They have some kind of leveling, and you beat this and you get a reward, kind of dopamine reward system built in. But older games are not intended to be addictive. They were intended to be creative. They were intended to be enjoyed by a really niche market, right? When I was growing up with video games and it was Mario and it's, your Super Nintendo and your regular Nintendo and even your Nintendo 64, the market was growing, but it was not what it is right now. So in America right now, there's something like 150 million gamers. That includes half of whom are just mobile gamers. They play off their phones. This includes everyone from moms at soccer practice playing Candy Crush to our kids who are playing, Call of Duty, to adult gamers. The average gamer is actually 36. So that includes these people who are full-blown adults. They have their own kids, but they game for themselves because they enjoy it as well. So there's this gamut of gamers. And in that, most of those games are designed to be addictive. They have reward systems built in. They have, there's a bunch of stuff, but the hedonic treadmill of this idea that they're going to give you a certain amount of pleasure and then remove it so that you want to come back to it again. And they do that by limiting the number of moves you can make in a day, or requiring you to pay to be able to move further in a day, but basically by spacing out your gameplay. And then your spend, or you have to wait for your whatever jewels to recharge, or your characters to get to mine more resources, or whatever it is, right? They keep us in this loop of playing so that we will come back to it. That is not something true in old video games. We're talking regular Nintendo. And if a kid has never played a video game and they go back and play a regular Nintendo game, it's still exciting because you are being part of the story, and it's the exact same thing that was engaging to original gamers back then. But those games didn't become exciting. Or didn't stay exciting, So you had to get more intense games. Now, when you're working with something like dopamine reward, you either need it more frequently. So if you played twice a week, you don't need it 3 times a week. Or you need it for a longer period of time. So if you played for a half hour, you now need 45 minutes. Or you need higher intensity. So it can be a half hour. It can still be twice a week. But now I need it to be a much more engaging experience. So that's where graphics and game rate of play, the game pace, picks up. So if you look at original Nintendo versus Super Nintendo, there is a escalation in the graphics, in the intensity of the games, in the length of time it takes to beat a game. And again, when you go to PlayStation and Nintendo 64, and again, when you go to Xbox and the advanced versions of the PlayStation, and again, when that Xbox is now... Well, at the time of this recording, we have an Xbox One, and you have PlayStation 4, and then personal computer gaming is now kind of the leading edge of graphics and intensity and interactive gameplay. And we have gaming now at such a scale that if we let a 8-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old just jump into a adult's game, a game that was supposed to be for me as an individual who's gamed for 17 years, and I have built up a lot of resistance to my dopamine reward system. And now we just toss a 10-year-old into that. That kid's getting a dose of dopamine that was intended for me, but that becomes their baseline, right? And now this is where we see this push to virtual reality. Well, regular reality isn't enough. I need more intense experiences. Well, now we're going to block out everything. We're going to slap this straight into your retinas, and we are going to give you an intense experience like nothing before, because that's what we need in order to feel good, in order to want to come back to it, right? So when we talk old games then, old games don't do that. Now, can you be unhealthy on old video games? Yes. Please note, I'm not saying that old games are good magically. I'm saying they are not designed to be addictive. The rate of their play, the way they get you to come back to that play, the way they developed the levels and the leveling system and defeating a game and winning it, right? To finish a game was the goal. So original Mario, you could beat in a half hour. Or you die so much you don't want to play it anymore and you walk outside. It's much harder to be unhealthy with those level of games. It's still possible. The reset tool, go to flintandiron.org/parent resources, and you will see what a reset is, and it'll walk you through what you're looking for. But older games are slower paced, and they're going to be safer in that. To tie in with that, it's the time to play. When you play it, again, the half hour to beat Mario, whereas if you go with the game, even the last 8 years, something like a Skyrim, you're going to be playing 60 to 100 hours in that game, and that's in a single playthrough. That's not repeated playthroughs. Yes, it is possible to be unhealthy in your time with a much more simple game. I know people who played Pong for hours and failed out of a course in college, right? Like they didn't have healthy boundaries around how they were interacting with their technology. And so it's even more important for us to be intentional with the way we engage our tech, to choose games that are going to be easy to beat and have smaller play times. With that in mind, though, something like a Fortnite, which has a small playtime, 15 minutes is like an average game time for that. It is not designed to only be played once. You have to practice. Your goal is to win. And since you're winning against other people, you're constantly competing against their ability level. So it drives you back in. It tells you your rank, and you want to be number 1 with your team. So if you were number 12, you're going to get back there. I have kids who spent a weekend, they played 12 Fortnite games, and they took second 4 or 5 times, right? That's what drove them back to playing again and again and again. It's this idea that they were almost there. So we do want to make sure we're aware that, yes, time to play a single game is valuable, but how much time is it asking us to invest in it? And can we just walk away? So number one frustration of young kids when I ask them, hey, what do you wish adults knew about video games? I wish my parents knew I can't pause an online game. I'm in Fortnite, Mom. I'm in, whatever, Overwatch, Dad. I can't just stop this game because I'm on a team. We're competing together. And if I just walk away, sometimes it hurts their rank, but oftentimes it just hurts their team because now they're down a player. So time to play would be the second one. We want a game that is quick to beat so that we don't lose our sleep. We don't lose motivation to do other things because we know the game was fun, but I have these other things I enjoy and I can go into those things as well. And the third thing would be looking at microtransactions. Older games don't have them. A microtransaction is where you go in, you purchase something using real world money, and you get something in the game. So this could be a new outfit for a character, or it could be a weapon that makes you do better in the game, or even new levels that you could play through. But the idea is you either downloaded a game for free or you purchased one already, and then this is your additional purchase to get you something. Sometimes it comes through something like a loot crate, so that you buy for a certain amount of dollars a series of unknown items, and then you get to unveil them and hopefully got something you wanted. The problem with microtransactions is it is a very difficult world for a 12-year-old, a 14-year-old, a 16-year-old even, with the developing prefrontal cortex, which is just a fancy way to say the part of your brain that helps you inhibit decisions. It's very hard for a kid in a stage where that's not developed yet to determine whether or not this is worth the money they are spending it. So we get kids who spend a lot of money on these games that, it was a $40, $50 game, but now they've dropped hundreds more dollars into it. And then that ties in investment because, I have this, I now have value invested in this game, so now I need to play it more. And this is where I get my kind of cool factor with my friends. That's just a very, very catchy format for games, and we want to avoid introducing our young people to that, especially to the gambling aspect of microtransactions when it comes to loot crates, loot boxes. So when we look at video games, we look at what games should my kids be playing. We want to look at old school games. Again, not because they're perfect, but because they have not yet developed a lot of the addictive progressive technology that we have now, which is really persuasive tech. This idea that we have behavioral psychology tied in with technological advancement for the way we follow a user's habits, and a lot of the online games are feeding data back to the companies so they can tailor the gaming experience to your gamer. And that's very important that we recognize that. A couple other things about older games is the graphics just aren't as good, right? So when you're playing an older game, even if it is violent, so you're playing a Contra or something, the violence is generally cartoonish at best. It's just not as gratuitous. There are modern games where the violence is really intense and people are getting their heads blown off and they're getting limbs ripped off. And sometimes you're being rewarded for destroying and killing your enemies in very graphic and grotesque ways. And the older games, even the more violent ones, just simply can't cross a certain threshold of intensity because they're not that graphic. In addition, they just the rate of play itself is not as flashy lights. There's not stuff coming from everywhere. There are certainly some games that have a lot of flashing and stimulus, but it is going to be even the most stimulating older game. When we talk older, we're talking like original Nintendo, Super Nintendo, even into Nintendo 64. They're just not as intense when it comes to some of the internet addictive disorders we're seeing or technology addiction that we're seeing. Older games aren't as likely to do that. So then I get asked, all right, well, what games? So when you go, please go use my game review sheet. But if you're looking for what older games, so if you go buy one of those Nintendo minis or a Nintendo emulator, you can play games like any of the Mario Brothers. You can play games like Mega Man. You can play a game like a Zelda or an Excitebike or a Tecmo Bowl, where they're fun, especially if kids aren't used to the high-end graphics yet. They are fun. They're interactive. They can be played in a really short amount of time, and then they can be walked away from because there's not this progressive storyline where you have to figure it all out. Zelda would be a little bit different because it does actually have some save points. But for a Super Nintendo, you might have the Mario World kind of progression, something like a Donkey Kong where there's puzzles and it's an action game, but it's still fun. Zelda Link to the Past is a great game. Now that it adds in some spiritual elements where they're talking about good, bad, evil. There's a wizard involved. There's some time travel. There's kind of a dark side of the world where the bad guys have won that you're kind of trying to change history by going between two timelines. So do know that, but the game pace is good and it's engaging, and it is a game that can be a lot of fun for kids and be an interesting idea of heroes and good and bad and some of those bigger conversations. Games like Super Tecmo Bowl or Rampart, where you build a little castle and then fire cannonballs at each other. They're a little bit of puzzle, a little bit of problem solving, but just fun games that can be picked up, played, and then walked away from. When you get into the Super Nintendo, by the way, you're going to notice a theme here. I'm sticking with Nintendo because Nintendo spent 30 years developing a brand that is family safe. With the Switch, they have started introducing some games. Doom would be notable. Witcher would be notable, where these games are very intense. They're intended for adult audiences, and frankly, they don't really work well on the platform because the point of those is a really high-running graphics, a graphical game with really smooth gameplay and really fast pace, which none of those are really what the Switch was built for. So I think Nintendo whiffed on that, but they're not giving up the money for it. They just produced a game, they ported it over, it was already made, and now they're just selling it to people that want it. So I'm going to pick Nintendo as the game to go for because Nintendo has spent years trying to develop games that weren't the quote-unquote mainstream. So with that, Super Nintendo or Nintendo 64 then, I would keep with some of those same games. You're looking at sports games like Madden and Ken Griffey Baseball or something. You're looking at racing games like Mario Kart. You're looking at Zeldas and Marios, and some side branches like maybe a Yoshi's World. There are games that are going to be more violent. There are games that are going to be more intense that you may not want your child to play with. So keep that in mind when you look at that. And then again with the Switch, so the Switch is a modern gaming system. It certainly has some ability to be addictive. I personally know a family friend who had a kid playing games and was sneaking it in the middle of the night, even with the parent safety and the family expectations set up. And the Switch itself has an app where you can control how much they can play, etc. But this kid was getting unhealthy, and so when they took it away, there was a full knockdown, drag out. Kid went kind of off the deep end and yelled and screamed and threw stuff and like got really, really upset about their gaming. And that's simply because that kid was finding their joy and their hope out of their next chance to game. And when that gaming system went away, their dopamine system basically was so overwhelmed that they realized life can't be fun right now. Now, here's the good news. If your kid's there already and you're hearing this just feeling guilt and shame, please don't. What you need to know is there are things we can do. When you look at their reset and you go, man, my kid is not healthy. They've got a 1 out of 5 or a 3 out of 5 on that reset. You need to know that that's not something that's irredeemable. You can help your child reset their brain and get the ability to feel joy in real life. And faith is going to play a part of that, because we need to remind our children, this isn't us hating games, this is us loving you. And sometimes these games are unhealthy for you. And we're going to hold that standard above your day-to-day enjoyment. Because we love you more and we have hope for your future, way more than we fear games or technology or anything like that. This isn't about living in fear. It's about living in the hope of what there is. But if you do have a Switch, again, Donkey Kong, Mario, Zelda, there's Yoshi games, and then things like Overcooked. These games that are creative and they're kind of quirky. You're literally doing a cooperative cooking game. So those are some suggestions. Please still use the video game resource on answering for your family. Is this something we should do? And make sure that video games are not the only thing our kids are doing for fun. Yes, video games are amazing. They are incredible experiences. I had very good experiences growing up with video games, but a conversation we'll get to in the future, I don't still play them. In fact, in my life, I realized as an adult, so just in the last few years, video games were too much for me. I didn't have enough of an off switch. I have a family, a career. I have goals that I want to accomplish, and video games are very quickly supplanting those things. So I do recognize as well that this is a stage of life thing. There are times when we can be doing it, and there are times where maybe we're not in a good spot. And I am not in a good spot, so I don't game. When we talk with our kids, we keep that as the focus. Who are you in light of what Christ has done for you? You were not saved for your own good. You were saved for what God has planned for you. And out of that, we need to make sure we are living and loving others. So thank you guys for being a part of this first conversation. I hope it was helpful. I hope you understand a little more of the idea of how do we make a decision on what games are acceptable to play. I hope you go check out that online resource. It's under Parent Resources with flintandiron.org, where you can then talk about, Mom and Dad, can I play this game? And I hope that if you have any questions, you send them to me. I'm on, we are on Instagram. We're at Sparking Purpose. You can find us through Facebook. Flint and Iron are at Sparking Purpose as well. And we would love to have a further conversation about how do we raise kids who love God and use tech. And I look forward to continuing the conversation with you soon.